fruity.
Iron ore has been smelted for over 2 millennia. In the Jurassic Age, ground layers were formed including ironstone in the Liassic and Oolitic beds. As the seas retreated, outcrops were exposed. The Liassic beds in North Lincolnshire exposed blue-grey ore and became known as Frodingham ironstone and was smelted in Scunthorpe. Milestone ironstone is a red-coloured material extensive in Oxfordshire but exposed from Wartnaby to Grantham in an escarpment featuring Belvoir Castle and Lincoln Cathedral. Northampton sand was formed in the Oolitic beds and yielded higher amounts. The Milestone escarpment is not as high but covers a greater distance. There is a small outcrop in Claxby, deposited after the Jurassic in the Cretaceous age. All four types can be found in Lincolnshire. Frodingham is low in silica and high in lime, and Claxby is low in iron but only mined in one small location. Northampton sand is the richest for iron but requires lime to be added to the furnace. Milestone is richer in iron than Frodingham, but the lime and silica content varies. Our first visit here in section 2 is to Woolsthorpe. This map's contour lines identify that the ironstone is at the top of the escarpment. Stanton Ironworks sent rock to the Grantham Canal in 1879 and lease applications came in 1883 at the same time as the G&R were branching from the Ambergate, Nottingham and Boston Eastern Junction Railway. The siding was named Botsford but was closer to Muston and ended at a cable-operated incline after 5 miles across open country. The incline was narrow gauge on a 1 in 12 gradient. The first load was dispatched in August 83 by locomotive Stanton No. 8. Later the fleet included Stanton No. 12, whose nameplate was Nancy. The wagons were similar to those at Wartnaby. Quarries named Brewer's Grave and Duke's Pit were exhausted by 1909 and the road over the top was diverted so the ironstone underneath could be obtained. The incline fell out of use by 1918. All work had been by hand in shallow pits. Harston Quarry continued, but all that remains for the industrial history seeker is the course of the incline at Cliff Wood, but in most cases trees were planted with no visible remnants. Workers would walk 2 to 3 miles to work in any weather and start at 0600. Ore was carted into wagons and soil into barrows and walked over planked trestles to the other side of the cuttings. The Great Northern named it the Denton branch. After the initial field clearance, tracks went into a tunnel under the road. Rails were spiked to wooden sleepers on earth ballast. This area was owned by Sir W. E. Welby Gregory of Denton Manor, the Duke of Rutland's neighbour. The Welby estates granted mineral rights for 60 years from 1933, covering 4,000 acres. The Belvoir estate was renewed for 25 years from 1944 for 1,145 acres in Nipton, Harston and Croxton Kerrial parishes. Tunnels under roads were blasted out of the rock bed and supported with girders. Work commenced near Nipton in 1924 at the foot of the Oolitic cliff with an overburden of 20 feet, so a 20-ton Ruston Proctor was fitted with a long jib in 1926. Several tipping stages were erected. Work here completed in 1943. Beasley's No. 1 and 2, Harston Numbers 1 and 2 followed similar patterns, and to the west, Cedar Hill, all used bigger draglines on caterpillar tracks. By the end of the war, diesel machines appeared and Harston No. 2 boasted the first electric machine, a 55 RB. At Denton, an additional loco, Denton, was used as well as the previous mentioned Nancy. During the war, 4 locos operated the tramways, and the final fleet of 6 were Nipton, Stanton No. 12, Holwell No. 5, Welby, Nancy and Beaver, all used extensively in other company quarries. In 1950, those that weren't sent to Eastwell were scrapped on site. The working of narrow gauge tramways came to a close post-war, and either track was upgraded to standard gauge or laid additionally. Any quarries that had been worked shallow were now plundered deeper with bigger draglines and greater output. Many tramways were simply laid on the same routes as the narrow gauge. Mapping this complexity has been difficult. Andrew Barclay 6 coupled saddle tanks were in use, with locomotives named Salmon, Rutland, Sir Joseph, and older names adopted like Denton, Beaver and Holwell, and occasional appearances from Mary and Oxfordshire. Many locos were saved by the preservation movement, transferring to the North Yorkshire moors and rocks by rail, as well as Beaver to the Stour Valley Railway in Essex. In latter years, 27-ton tipplers ran on rails spiked to concrete sleepers. All work went to 2 days a week from 1972, the last day of use being the 14th of February 1974. Some buildings were dismantled and re-erected at either the Market Overton Industrial Railway Association for use at Flying Scotsman Enterprises or to Cottesmore. Track was lifted in the spring of 1980. Lorry work had continued as the tramways closed, but the final lorry tipping dock was dismantled in 1969. The Dyke branch. Holwell Iron Company were, by 1894, quite expert at withdrawing ironstone from the ground. The Scunthorpe steel mills were expanding, and with the assistance of a 2-mile G&R branch from the Grantham main line, Holwell entered into a contract to give them access to a record-breaking 19,500 acres of the Buckminster estate over the next 60 years, over 15 parishes. Colsterworth was being managed by Frodingham Iron and Steel, and during World War II, production in this area expanded to meet the war demand. With Harlaxton, these quarries also survived the downturn in the 1960s, even though lorries were by then delivering to the Dyke. Underground mining was tried near Thistleton and Easton, but technical difficulties prevented these from turning a profit. However, this area at surface lasted a whole decade longer than in Melton and Beaver. Buckminster had the first quick increase from a steady flow in 1908 to increased capacity for Scunthorpe steel sheet production in 1912. These quarries were unique in having access to the main line via the Dyke and also the Midland and Great Northern joint line. There were a number of well-used level crossings en route. There was a place marked as Stainby Station on the maps, and it must have seen a great deal of traffic but no passengers, nor any other evidence to suggest why it was so named. In 1926, history was made when No. 5 was made a circular quarry. All traffic moved in one direction. Stainby Lodge now sits on the peninsula surrounding the island in the centre of the activity. Eventually a fault occurred and work split the circle, returning to working as 2 quarries, the first during the war and the latter into the 1960s. When Holwell closed in 1962, Earlham's sole source of ore was from Buckminster, drying up the following year. By 1965 there was 1 train a day through Stainby. Ironstone was becoming expensive to extract, and men were allocated to hedge and ditch work as the demand decreased. A weed-killing train cleared the route in 1967 to allow for a gambled increase in traffic as South Witham closed. 15,000 tonnes were sent weekly until February 1970. In March of 1970, British Steel was founded and took over all quarries. Colsterworth remained until 1973 with Euclid lorries. Remaining diesel locos were distributed to Corby. most fields were returned to agriculture with crops growing by summer. As usual, when railways were being built, the M&GNR was no exception. Certain minerals were discovered under the ground, most notably at Colsterworth and Thistleton. During construction of the railway, a bed of Lincolnshire limestone 60 foot thick was revealed, which the Holwell Iron Company started work on for use as flux in the furnaces. Eventually, both the Great Northern and the Midland and Great Northern Joint Railway joined each other across the Ironstone quarry branches, providing an in and out route to different locations around the country. Note that at Little Bytham, the mainline railways crossed but gave no access to each other. Work continued around this area well into the late 1930s, and with the outbreak of World War II, Stanton Ironworks wanted to explore possibilities of reaching all of the Northampton sandstone beneath the surface. Over 2,000 acres of land in the parishes of Streaton, Greetham, Thistleton, Castle Bytham and North Witham were released for the sole intention of underground mining, all under heavy cover. The lease would last to the turn of the millennium, and with freehold, land and minerals being obtained cheaply in the 1940s due to slumps in prices, farmers remained as tenants. Production started with a target of 500,000 tonnes per annum and continued throughout the war and during the 1955 modernisation programme. Mining at Thistleton took place underneath Market Overton's No. 5 and No. 6 quarries, with 2 foot 8.5 inch gauge tramway and 2 Ruston and Hornby diesel locomotives fitted with headlamps. The mine proved to be highly successful as a workable operation, so economically it could not compare favourably with open cast working. In 1948, the mines were inspected by the press and the BBC. As significant improvements were introduced, further underground mining in different areas of the country were applied for, following these successes. Extracting ore from under the ground continued, and Balfour Beatty created their own line of 2 foot gauge across their entire mine system, which rather complicated matters. There were now 4 different gauges and diesel locomotives on each of these gauges. It was originally intended to work the line by electric locomotive. Overhead line equipment, including line side posts, were installed, from which the locos were to take power via pantographs. The conductor wires were arranged in a slight zigzag fashion to spread the pickup of the pantographs. The first of these locos, of 224 horsepower, were supplied by English Electric Limited, but were constructed by E. Bagley of Burton-on-Trent. No more were built. 1962 was the busiest period, when 390,000 tonnes per annum output was reached. However, production ceased in 1964, and 130 miners were given 6 months' notice. By the end of 1965, all narrow gauge track, which had been built to serve the tunnels, was lifted, and the tunnels were bricked up in 1966 and are now heavily shrouded by trees. One for Steve Picker to explore. Market Overton, which will be discussed in the Cottersmore section, housed Flying Scotsman Enterprises, and by 1973 their fleet stood at 11 locomotives. It had been envisaged to move the fleet to Buckminster, with a committal from the quarry owners, but after British Rail had a change of heart over an economic downturn, the future changed. Scotsman and its stablemates, including Pendennis Castle, needed a new home, especially with British Rail announcing the severing of the High Dyke branch in October 1974. Closure of the line was fast, and all track was lifted by the autumn of 1975. Thanks for watching. Please like or subscribe, or tell your mates and forward all the links on. Your interaction with my videos helps get more traffic and more people come to see the videos and enjoy them as much as you do. And I hope to see you soon for part 3.